Good morning, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode here of On the FinSide with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media outlets, as well as the Fansided Network and FinFanatic.com. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul is fanatic_pick on Twitter. The Dolphins play the Vikings this week. Dolphins 3-2. Vikings a somewhat surprising 4-1. And the Vikings are favored by 3.5 points, expected to also be a hot one again in Miami, temperatures in the mid 80s, which tends to play to the Dolphins' favor. Now, looking at this game, obviously the big storyline, Skylar Thompson is going to be starting at quarterback. Dolphins did not have a lot of success with him last week, but did play a little bit better than I initially gave him credit for on our show following the game, where I gave the quarterbacks an F. But Teddy Bridgewater is expected to be the backup. That's a whole different scenario that makes my blood boil. But yeah, Paul, this is big here. I mean, every game's big, but this one might be the difference between you're starting off 4-2 and you still have the weaker part of your schedule coming up. You're likely to get Tua back in the next couple of weeks. Or going 3-3, and now you're starting to really get a little bit concerned that the train has fallen off the tracks here.
At this point, I wouldn't be concerned that the train's falling off the tracks. I'm hopeful that Xavier Howard can play tomorrow, so long as he can keep himself healthy. Doing so, I'm a little worried about Noah Igbenogany more so than I'm worried about Skylar, if that makes any kind of sense, because it's our starting quarterback tandem tomorrow, given the fact that Kader Kohu is now doubtful. Maybe Keon Crossan and Noah Igbenogany with Nick Needham. So that's not exactly ideal. But that being said, Kirk Cousins does have a tendency to throw interceptions at this point in time. He's averaging one a game.
Yeah, and for that reason, with the trade deadline coming up, I'm jumping on board with the idea of trading the Commanders for cornerback William Jackson. I'm fully on board with that. Kyle Krabs talked about that on his podcast, and I'm with it. And the reason for that is, look, William Jackson has kind of that Sean Smith syndrome from years ago, where when he was in a pure press cornerback alignment, he was a decent player because he was so big and so long. But when he got into his zone defense, he was probably the worst cornerback I've ever seen. William Jackson is in that same arena.
I do like him as a possibility, but a move that they could make today potentially would be if Chris Greer were to call up Kevin King, and who is trying to take the year to get healthy, who may be able to, if Greer were to offer him a 2-year deal. We may be able to see him come out, play a few games, because he is healthy, but he just wanted to get his body ready to go for next season. See him come out, play a game, and basically tell him, like, look, we're going to give you the opportunity to get healthy. We just need you for a game here. And see where it goes from there.
Interesting. That's a name I hadn't thought about, and he fits that same long cornerback type of profile. I hadn't really thought about that name in a while. But William Jackson, he'll make, he's scheduled to make what, 10.8 million this year, but the Commanders have already paid more than half of that. And you would think that it would be, if I were to guess, a 4th or a 5th round pick is what I think the price would be for him. And yeah, I'd certainly be willing to do it. He's 30 years old, but I think if you're talking about somebody who's not going to cost a lot of money for the next 2 years, get him in here, because I don't have a lot of confidence Byron Jones is coming back anytime soon, and maybe not even the entire year with how things have progressed. He was supposed to be ready for minicamp. Here we are 6 games into the season. He's not here, and there's no sign of him being here anytime soon. William Jackson, if you get him in here, he teams with Xavier Howard, and now you're able to play defense the way the Dolphins wanted to play defense, because that's the issue. They can't play defense the way that they want to.
No, we want to talk about the pass rush as an example. It is very hard to get a pass rush going when your cornerbacks are struggling to cover people. It's if you're giving a quarterback a look where he can make a read in under 2.5 seconds, you can't fully blame the pass rush in those situations.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand, as we've talked about. I mean, it's the other part of that too is if the pass rush isn't getting there, it's obviously affecting the defensive backs, and the pass rush as a whole hasn't been great this year. And the turnovers haven't been there. The Dolphins haven't had an interception since their opening drive against the Patriots. We're headed into week 6, and there are some reasons for that. I mean, you look at last week. I mean, the Jets get off to a 12-0 lead, and then Kyle Wilson from that point throws the ball 15 more times the rest of the game, and not many passes, if any, over 10 yards from that point. So it's kind of hard to get interceptions in that scenario. So it goes hand in hand. But I think if you fix the cornerback's position, you start blitzing a little bit more, the pass rush is going to get there. The Dolphins are going to start taking advantage of these weaker quarterbacks on their schedule moving forward. So I'm a big proponent here of that move. But for this game, let's assume that doesn't happen. Yeah, Xavier Howard says he's felt better than he has in weeks, which is a great sign because he's going up against the NFL's leading receiver in Justin Jefferson. Cater Kohu is not expected to play. That's kind of a late development here. Byron Jones obviously out. So, yeah, I mean, you got to figure something out.
Yeah, and just one more thing to that point, though, too, is Miami's been in position to make interceptions. They've gotten their hands on a lot of balls, a lot of interceptable balls, and they have not been able to reel them in. And I expect that to be something that once it breaks, you're going to see Miami get those in fits and spurts. And then that is going to help a lot of things because once a quarterback is actually throwing a few interceptions, they start making poor decisions.
Yeah, they do. And Kirk Cousins hopefully is one of those quarterbacks that makes those poor decisions. And you take a look at him. I mean, the Vikings have a very well-balanced offense. I mean, Kirk Cousins has always been a better than average quarterback. And the same thing applies this year. I mean, the Vikings have put up a lot of points this year, not a crazy amount, but you take a look at the last few games. I mean, they put up 29 in the last game, 28 the game before that, 28 the week before that against Detroit. Big reason that they're 4-1. They've also not won a road game this year. They're 3-6 on the road this year and last year. So a team that tends to be a little bit weaker on the road, and the Dolphins have won their last 8 home games. But going back to the defensive backs or to the defense here, I've really urged the Dolphins defensively to dial it back over the last few weeks as far as the cover zero and the blitzing for a variety of reasons. I mean, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, obviously top level type quarterbacks. You probably don't want to blitz the hell out of them all day. And then last week against Zach Wilson, I thought if Zach Wilson shook loose, that's when, and he would only be able to make big plays. So, but this week it's different. Kirk Cousins on the year has a quarterback rating of 56 when he's blitzed. So you look at that and say, okay, if you can disrupt his timing, he's also one of he play actions more than every other quarterback in the league heading into this week, except for Justin Herbert. So he play actions a lot. He's not great against the blitz this year. I think the blueprint is kind of there for what the Dolphins defense and Josh Boyer need to do.
It is. And it's very much a scenario where you need to get to him, but you also need to account for Dalvin Cook. I mean, like you said, with Justin Jefferson, he's leading the league right now with 544 yards, which is hilarious because he literally has 2 more yards than Tyreek Hill.
Wait, Justin Jefferson?
Yeah.
I thought you said Dalvin Cook. I
mentioned Dalvin Cook, but I was talking about the receiving core too.
Got it.
I was kind of talking about both, but then you look over at Dalvin Cook, he's averaging 4.6 yards per carry. He's been a very effective runner, even though he hasn't found pay dirt a lot. He's only got 1 touchdown on the year. But at the same time, the interesting thing matchup wise is he's got the same yards per carry as Raheem Mostert. He's just carried the rock a little more.
Yeah, he has. And that's stopping Dalvin Cook early is going to be a big thing in this game, because if you can do that, if Dalvin Cook has a lot of success here in the first quarter, then that play action is going to work a lot more effectively, because the defensive line is going to be more focused on stopping the run. That's what's going to open things up for the Vikings defense. And if you give them those options, you can either double team Justin Jefferson and try to bracket him in, but you've also got one-on-one coverage all over the rest of the field with guys like Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, KJ Osborne, who can beat one-on-one coverage, especially against a battered secondary. So yeah, the Vikings are a team that tend to start hot, and the Dolphins over the entire year have been a team that hasn't. And that's something to watch out for this game, because look, I've given Mike McDaniel the benefit of the doubt a lot this year as far as what's happened the last 2 weeks. Okay. You had the major injury with Tua in the Bengals game. You had Teddy Bridgewater inexplicably be taken out of the game, or I'm going to say ejected from the game after the first play. And I can understand to this point a couple of reasons for the slow starts, but not this game. If the Dolphins come out of the first quarter down 14-0, or heck, even down by a touchdown, I'm going to start looking at Mike McDaniel saying, what needs to happen for this team to get started a little earlier and not playing catch up the whole game?
Yeah, it is weird that Miami has not been able to start hot in a lot of these games, and it's definitely a team that starts hot versus a team that tends to close, and they both don't play well in the other portion of the game. It's the Vikings have let a lot of teams back in this year when they've gotten out to a big lead, and Miami has managed to come back a lot of times in their victories this year. But what I will say too, and it was pretty cool, was having Thomas Morstead on the show the other day. He was talking about the fact that McDaniel has been consistent, still trying to be that teacher, and he's very genuine and honest. And I'm sure if he were asked that question, he'd give a fairly honest answer, as much as he knows at the moment. And it is something that Miami needs to get a little better at. Maybe they need to have Sam give the pregame pep talk. I'm not sure. But if Miami can come out and get an early lead and force the Vikings to be one-dimensional, yes, they've got Justin Jefferson, AJ Thielen, or Adam Thielen, and KJ Osborne. But forcing them to be one-dimensional lets your pass rushers really pin their ears back. And it neutralizes a little bit of the impact Dalvin Cook can have on the game. And it neutralizes the impact of those play actions you were talking about. So that's where Miami does need to start hot in this one and be able to play with that lead and do the things that they're set up to do.
Yeah, and defensively, the Viking, obviously, Justin Jefferson can make the big play. I mean, he can do really anything on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like is that I think the Dolphins can play a little bit more cover zero, pin your ears back, get to the quarterback, because it so much disrupts the play action, disrupts the timing. And if they beat you over the top, they beat you over the top. That's how I look at how the strategy should be defensively for the Dolphins. Another interesting matchup is Christian Darrisaw at left tackle going up against Jalen Phillips. Now, when the Dolphins were picking with their second pick of the first round of the 2021 draft, Christian Darrisaw and Jalen Phillips were two of the most highly rated players on the board. The Dolphins went with Phillips. I don't regret that pick, but Darrisaw's been a stud for the Vikings. And you look at last week against the Bears, 0 sacks, 0 pressures. And Phillips had a very good game against the Bengals, was okay against the Jets. We're looking for kind of that breakout performance from him. But if he gets blanked here by a really good left tackle in Darrisaw, I'm going to start really worrying about this pass rush, because they've got a good test this week against the Vikings offensive line, one of the better units in the league. And he and Agba combined overall for the year haven't been very good against just getting to the quarterback, and that's affected a lot of things too. If you were to pin it down to two things, the cornerbacks being hurt, and the lack of pass rush from the defensive ends. Those are the two major pain points right now so far this year.
Yeah, and it's the other guy I'm looking to see get to pay dirt a little bit more here is Emmanuel Aqua, and it's he's somebody that I've seen be right there a number of times, and that he's the guy that I feel is the most impacted by the injuries in the secondary right now. He tends to be right there, but not quite get to pay dirt right now. And I think if we had just slightly better coverage behind him, we'd see him get to pay dirt. Now, him going up against O'Neal, that could be a very interesting critical matchup in this game.
Yeah, O'Neal is one of the better right tackles in the league, a little bit on the thin side, more of an athletic right tackle. Agba is more of a power defensive end. So that's going to be a fascinating matchup to see if he can push him back. Somebody who definitely can be pushed back is their center, and that's Garrett Bradbury. He was a former first-round pick, a good zone center, but when he's going, heads up against a massive defensive tackle in the trenches, he tends to struggle. And I think that's a matchup the Dolphins need to win on the defensive side of the ball with Wilkins, with Zach Sealer, with Raekwon Davis. And so that really, defensively, that's kind of the strategy. I think the Dolphins need to be very blitz heavy, disrupt Kirk Cousins, but also you can't let Dalvin Cook go off in the first quarter. You can't come out with a slow start defensively, or else it's going to set a very bad tone for the rest of the game. We've seen that in the last couple of weeks. In addition to that, in addition to the slow starts defensively, 17 penalties over the last two games, and that's not going to cut it either. So, fascinated to see how this team responds, because if we come out of this game and the Dolphins are 4-2 and Tua is coming back, I still think this season can be really special. You fall to 3-3. No, the whole season's not derailed. You still have Tua coming back, but things get a lot harder, and you've officially fallen back to the pack and you're a 500 team. Go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead. We've started off slower than this over the past 2 years and ended up being a 10-win team. And by all accounts, this is a better team that's going into a very easy, get yourself healthy portion of the schedule here. So even if they end up 3-3, I do not think Miami's in any way, shape, or form falling apart at the seams at that point. It's these injuries, they are what they are. Another guy too that actually just got mentioned in chat that I want to bring up, that we see just kind of getting healthy and starting to get back into form, that could be an interesting one in this game, is Andrew Van Ginkel. We've seen him in the past have a handful of plays that have a huge impact on a game. And as he's getting healthier and getting more playing time, he could be interesting to watch in this one. And the other one that got a few snaps last week and we really got excited about, especially the way he blitzed in college, Channing Tindall. So there's some interesting X factors on this defense, even with some of the secondary depleted.
Yeah, there are. And Van Ginkel, not much to mention to this point, but yeah, getting back healthy. And Color there in the chat as well. Mention, I just lost his comment. I'm bad with this here. We must get out in front early to give our D a chance to cook in the heat of Miami. That's exactly right. That's got to be the strategy. Here is, I really feel that if the Dolphins are winning this game after the first quarter, they're going to win the game. If they get off to that slow start again, I don't think they will. And I'm concerned about that heading into this contest, that the just constant slow starts and feeling out the opponent in the first quarter has sometimes worked to the Dolphins' benefit. But in this type of game where you've got your third string quarterback playing, you can't get down. You cannot be playing catch up this entire game. And so looking at the offensive side of the ball, Skylar Thompson's getting the start. He was hit last week 16 times and also had 6 drop passes, one of which too was, we didn't talk about it, Tanner Connor. The Dolphins are down 19-17. Tanner Connor drops a wide open pass that, he may have gone for a touchdown. If not, the Dolphins would have had the ball in the red zone. What a blown opportunity, and so many blown opportunities here last week. Teddy Bridgewater should be the backup. And if nobody has seen the video, it just shows how big of a joke this spotter thing is. I'm all for being a little bit more aware and looking for concussion like symptoms in a game. I really am. And so when they changed the rule, I said, okay, I think that might be a good thing. It took all of one play for this to become a joke. Teddy Bridgewater did not wobble. It's very clear. I mean, we just watch the video. The guy did not wobble, but somebody in New York who is not a doctor, who is a trainer's aide, saw him wobble, get out of the game. I don't know if the Dolphins would have won that game against the Jets. I can't go down that road, but what a joke. I hope Teddy Bridgewater does get in this game, throws 4 touchdowns, and the NFL can go F itself.
Yeah, I am for better protection around the concussion issue. That said, there needs to be something that's more reviewable for those folks to double check that they saw what they saw. Or for somebody to double check that they saw what they saw. Because if they had a secondary review group in New York watch that tape, they would have basically called up and said, hey, you can put Teddy back in. Like, it's very, very disheartening to have it be something that is an instant snap judgment call that removes a player for the rest of the game and puts them in the concussion protocol for the week.
Even the stupidest human being on the planet should agree that somebody who didn't have a concussion shouldn't be in concussion protocol the following week. That in totality keeps Teddy Bridgewater out 2 games for not having a concussion, because he's not starting in this game. Maybe he gets in at some point, but what a joke. What a absolute joke. But
well, the other side of that before we move on there too is the fact that the spotters in some of these NFL games were so egregious in what they allowed to continue. We saw Fields on Thursday Night Football kind of wobbly trying to get up. We saw
just in the Jets game,
Braxton Berrios in the Jets game, literally struggling to walk right after getting hit and not be removed from the game, with the camera zoomed completely in on him in those moments. So, it was up on the freaking Titantron of the game. Like, and that's where, if they can't even be consistent at the one individual game, I just don't get it. Like, it's goofy. Like, it's almost like the guy was trying to take a bite of his hot dog and somebody went, "Ooh, that was a hit." And he's like, "Oh, get him out of the game. Get him out of the game."
Right. Well, here's the deal. If the issue is a player getting up and not acting completely himself after a big hit, if that's an issue, no, just end NFL football. Get rid of it. What do you want? A guy gets a big hit and you want him to get up singing and dancing, and if he's not, he's out of the game. Screw you. Yeah, I'm sick of it. And I've always been for the protection of the game and head injuries. This is not that. You're taking players out of the game who are not actually hurt. All right.
That's what happens when you make decisions and policies based on a knee-jerk reaction to an individual incident.
Correct. So literally, it's a position I mocked for weeks, that we're going to take these decisions out of the hands of doctors and put it in the hands of a guy in the stands who just knows. It doesn't matter what the doctor says. Screw the doctor. Who cares about the doctor? I just know. I saw the play. What a joke. Anyway, Skylar Thompson is going to start in this game. And the good news, Paul, is he and Mike McDaniel are going to have this week to actually prepare and get some plays in there. And furthermore, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, full participants this week. The ping pong table is being crafted and is going to be back in the locker room here shortly. Nobody be concerned about that. And the Dolphins do, like you said, have a running game now. I mean, you look at the last two games where the game has been close. into the fourth quarter, and they've really had to establish the run a lot more. I mean, Raheem Mostert has been sensational. I mean,
Yeah.
going north to south, I'm really impressed how easily he can take a small hole and turn that into 10 yards pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what Mike McDaniel's offense is all about as far as the running game goes. Hit the hole and go. Hit the hole and go. Hit the hole and go. And that's Raheem Mostert's game. So he's been a fantastic fit. Um, Chase Edmonds has been a little bit of a disappointment, but at least Edmonds is carving a little bit of a role in the receiving game when he's out there, as far as a lot of little short dink and dunk and screen passes, which is a guy that we knew he was. So I like Miami's running back room, even though I do think they can probably add to it a little bit this offseason.
Yeah, and I know you're in the same arena. Zaquandre White, getting a bigger back up there, I think is important, especially when the Dolphins do have a lead. And I'm laughing because Grandizer in the chat, Grandy, thanks for killing it again with everything you're doing there in the chat. Topics that upset me and are banned from discussion: Isaiah Ford drafting a fullback, big fat guys in the middle of the defense, NFL spotters, and showing love for former Dolphins players. Man, that's right on the money.
This is the week that you can probably play with giving Robert Hunt a screen pass from the fullback spot. Let's go.
Well, you crossed you crossed over.
Somewhere Jamie Nails would be cheering for this.
Several different things that anger me about that. Yeah, but yeah, and so Skylar Thompson in a quarterback, and I hope he makes some plays with his legs too, because you look at last week against the Vikings, Justin Fields kept the chains moving when he was making plays with his legs. I mean, the Vikings last week when they played the Bears, Fields ended the game with 118 quarterback rating, and the Bears scored on I think 4 straight possessions in the second and third quarter. I was watching that game. So I had the Dolphins game on, and then the Bears Vikings game was locally televised right next to it. It was 21-3 Vikings at one point. Kirk Cousins was 13 for 13, and the Vikings were about to score again to go up 28-3. And I just completely zoned out that game. And I was just really focused on the Dolphins game, obviously. I look up later in the fourth quarter and the Bears are up 22-21. I'm like, well, how did that happen? And then the Vikings end up winning that game 29-22. The Vikings always play an interesting game. There are a lot of ebbs and flows for the Vikings throughout a game. But one criticism that Eric Thompson had, that Vikings fans have, and Eric Thompson, we had a segment earlier, is from the Daily Norseman. One frustration the Vikings fans have about their new defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel, former Broncos defensive coordinator, is throughout the game, they don't adjust a lot. They play really a pure zone type of defense where it looks good early, but as the game goes along and the opposing quarterback figures it out, they don't adjust a lot. And that could be a big problem as this game progresses if the Vikings don't evolve, because, Mike McDaniel is going to make adjustments. That's probably the strongest part of his profile as an NFL coach. So that's going to be something fascinating to watch as this game goes on.
Yeah, and one thing I want to go back to as well, since we're talking about Skylar Thompson a little bit, and we talked about Fields making plays with his legs. Looking at Skylar Thompson's college tape, he was able to make a lot of things happen with his feet when he needed to. You just look at his sophomore and junior year, he had 219 attempts for 778 yards rushing and 16 touchdowns. So
Yeah.
if he is probably the most mobile option that we have at quarterback as well. That's something that I know we talked about a lot when Miami drafted him. And I know when looking at his tape, he was able to be a threat with his legs as well as his arm. And that's something that I hope Mike McDaniel was looking at the tape and gives him a little bit of that green light to take off with the ball, even though it's scary, because if he takes a hit and gets up a little bit wobbly, it'll be Reed Sinnett time. But you got to play to win regardless of the circumstances. And
I think that's
an arrow in your quiver here.
Yeah, I think it would be a big shame if we got out of this game and the Dolphins struggled offensively with Skylar Thompson, and then you look at the stat sheet and you don't see anything on the ground from him. Because I don't think they'll be spying him defensively with his legs. I don't think they know a lot about his mobility in the pocket because we didn't see it last game, and there's really no other film to judge it on. But yeah, he can make plays. And if you spread the field with Waddle, with Tyreek Hill, with Mike Gesicki, and then you take off, take the easy 10 or 15 yards. That's certainly something that should happen.
Well, their
Go
zone
ahead.
will spread the field as well by itself, even without spreading it with those guys. And that's kind of one of the cool things about going against a true zone team like Minnesota.
Yeah. And looking at the Vikings defense there, I think there's a big mismatch in favor of the Dolphins, and there's a big mismatch against the Dolphins. And the one against them is, look, Teron Armstead is truly questionable here, did not practice all week. He saw a specialist in New York. I was relieved to hear that, I was scared that it was going to be a bigger problem, that, we'd be blindsided with a report that he was going on IR. I'm glad that's not the case. And he might play in this game. He's going to do everything to play. He tried to play last week and he played 8 snaps and then he left the game. And then the week before against the Bengals, left in the fourth quarter and the offensive line fell apart. That's a major, major concern right now with Brandon Shell and with Greg Little. And I'm embarrassed that I gave the Dolphins offensive line a B+ in our post grades. That's why I need to go back moving forward and look more at the offensive line. But
I'm not embarrassed about any of my grades. I stick to my guns, sir.
Well, you said B- offensive line. I think that's far too high now too. I would have changed it to at least a C.
I'm sticking with my B-.
Whatever.
We have no instant replay on the FinSide.
So
my spotter said I'm okay.
Spotter said, well, that I believe. So on the edge, if you've got Brandon Shell and Greg Little going up against Zadarius Smith, and Danielle Hunter and DJ Wanham, that's a pretty good 3-man rotation at the edge spot. And I could see the Dolphins not only losing that, but being the thing that stifles the Dolphins offensively. On the other hand, you've got Tyreek Hill, you've got Jalen Waddle back, and this is a Vikings secondary that is not fast. They're just not. I mean, you got Cameron Dantzler and Patrick Peterson, a cornerback. Dantzler fell in the draft because he ran in the 4.6s. Peterson is 33. And at safety, you've got an aging Harrison Smith, and you've got a free safety in Cameron Bynum. None of these guys are known for their speed. So if they get over the top of these defensive backs, Skylar Thompson's got to hit those spots. And I have some questions if he can or not. But wide receivers should be running open in this game, Paul.
They should. And Tyreek Hill's always been a zone eater. Jalen Waddle is somebody I like seeing play against zone. It's when you've got those speedy receivers and they're going against zone, which has a lot more reactive moments. Those are two guys that are very hard to stick with. The other guy that I'm interested to see in this game is Mike Gesicki, because the Vikings and Durham Smythe, actually, because the Vikings have just been okay against the tight end. Not great, but okay. And with Miami having those 2 tight ends that can do some different things here, they may also be able to have a little bit of fun, especially with folks worrying about Tyreek and Waddle running through the zones.
Yeah, and Gesicki, obviously not a good game last week again, and I don't think he caught a pass. Then the week before, he's had 1 catch for 6 yards in the last 2 games. That is not acceptable. And I point my finger at the coaching staff on that. You've got to get him more involved. But I'm telling you, one of these games, Mike Gesicki's going to finish with 9 catches for 100 yards. They're going to blindside people. And this might be that game because Gesicki was on the field a lot last week. He had more snaps than Durham Smythe last week. So he's on the field a lot. And I think those opportunities are coming, but obviously it's been a nightmare of a season so far.
He got Skylar Thompson killed in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, he did. I'm surprised he wasn't killed before that, given that he was hit 16 times. Lions got to do better. I mean, yeah, it's Eichenberg's not doing well. Obviously, Connor Williams and Robert Hunt are. But yeah, I mean, if Armstead's out of the lineup, you've got 3 out of the 5 players who are just not playing well, and I don't see how that gets better. But if Armstead is in there, it has a ripple effect on the rest of the offense, especially with him playing the left tackle spot. So let's hope for the best. Let's hope that he plays and plays a full game. So Paul, anything else you want to add on the offensive or defensive side of the ball before we get into our predictions?
Nope, but I will make a bold prediction for this week that Tanner Connor makes up for last week and gets his first NFL touchdown in this game.
Got it. So as far as predictions are concerned, I'm going to go. I think this game will be close. The Vikings always play these close games. I mean, if you listen to our segment with Eric Thompson from the Daily Norseman, he said the last 3 weeks for the with the Vikings have taken years off his life. I don't blame him. The Vikings almost blew an 18-point lead to Justin Fields and the Bears last week. The week before that in London, there was the double doink part 2 game against the Saints where they won 28-25. And then the week before that, they squeaked one out 28-24 against the Lions. So I expect this to be a close game too. And I'm giving the edge to the Vikings. I'm going to go 24-21 Vikings. I have a funny feeling too that all the intangibles, the Dolphins losing 2 in a row, can actually implement a game plan. They have the home field advantage with the weather. Maybe it's flipped around and maybe they win the close game here, but I can't get over the matchups of Justin Jefferson against this banged up secondary and the Vikings pass rushers, Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, and DJ Wanham going up against these offensive tackles, especially if Armstead doesn't play or leaves early. So 24-21 Vikings, Paul.
I am going to say it stays close as well. And I do think this depleted secondary has an impact on the game. And I am going to go a little higher than you on this one. I'm going to go 34-31 Dolphins.
Okay.
I think it ends up being a shootout. I think they do struggle in the secondary to stop the Vikings, but I like the receiving core matchups, and I like what Skylar's able to do with his legs having an impact on this game. So it's going to be an interesting one, but Kirk Cousins is very due to drop a game here. He's not one of those guys that's going to give you a consistent 5-game stretch of we're killing it. And that's also one of those X factor, not on a stat sheet things with Cousins. And that's one of the knocks on him throughout his career is that he'll come out and he'll basically be Ryan Fitzpatrick in a lot of ways. So,
yeah. He could be due. And the Dolphins are due to go up against a quarterback like this and kind of push him around a little bit. With how they play defense, they blitz more than just about every team in the league, and Kirk Cousins isn't great against the blitz this year. Has been good in previous years though, so that's something that it's a question of do you trust with how the quarterback has performed over the last few years or what he's shown this year in a new offensive system. So
he found another way to be inconsistent. Good for you, Kirk Cousins.
I've always liked Cousins more than a lot of other people, but
I like him, but
he's got to go down this week. That's maybe he falls over and gets up and trips or something, and the spotter. If you're a spotter for the Dolphins this week, hey, get ready to eject somebody. Okay, it's time to get revenge. Okay,
I love that you're calling these ejections.
They're that's what they are. You're not removing somebody with a health issue. Teddy Bridgewater got up, walked back to the huddle, and gave a thumbs up to his team and started trying to call the play before he knew it was a safety. God, these people.
Well, maybe it was the confusion over the safety that shouldn't have been a safety that caused the spotter to go, he is concussed.
In any walk of life, stop yielding to the outrage mob who just, are largely based with stupid people. Stop. It's dumb. Stop doing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go Dolphins. Let's get to 4-2, even though I'm predicting a loss, but let's go. It's going to do it for our breakdown of the Vikings Dolphins matchup here on the FinSide. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul's Fanatic_pick. Follow Paul Fanatic_pick on Twitter. I'm Brian Cat NFL. And if it is not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide.